Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Good afternoon. Peace be unto you, everybody. Thank you for coming out on this beautiful day, nice and windy. Enjoying Minnesota is always a blessing, this weather. So when you know winter is around the corner. So thank you for having and being out here. My name is Salah Muhammad. I am a lead associate organizer for Muslim Coalition of Isaiah and Faith in Minnesota in Rochester, southern Minnesota. Co-organizing with my friend Jack Dudley. So it's a pleasure to have you here, and thank you, City Council President Brooke, Carlson, for being with us as our guest today, and the neighbors of Rochester. So today our meeting is all about the purpose and the grounding. Before we get into that, I just wanted to welcome and thank everybody. It's the 2:30, it's a little bit past few minutes, and sorry for that. I just wanted to see everybody settle and enjoy and mingle a little bit. So definitely we'll have more of that as we continue. I'll be also your chair for this event as well as we continue to do that. Let me tell a little bit about Isaiah. Isaiah is a vehicle for people to come together to build a path toward a caring economy that allows every person to thrive, and a multiracial, multicultural democracy that honors every person's dignity. We do that through having our own agenda about what we want. Today we'll be focusing on the following issues: culturally appropriate housing, housing affordability, homelessness, COVID response, community policing, youth investment. All of those things require that we work together across race and class to have a vision that more is possible together, and to take responsibility together to move to a democracy, our city and state, to lead on these things that matter to all of us. Today we start with building relationships and ways to co-govern with our City Council President Carlson, with also our Ward Council members, to build a city that welcomes everyone and accommodates all of us, no matter our backgrounds.
horta shirkan waxaan isugu nimay cidda soo abaabushay waa Muslim Coalition of Isaiah. muhiimadan u soo abaabulnay shirkan wuxuu yahay in horta la isku barto madaxweynaha golaha deegaanka muxuu ahaa Brooke Carlson, inaad barataan iyo jiiraankiin inaad barataan. maxaa la isu baranayaa in awoodda inay gacanteena ku jirto inay idin muuqato si looga wada hadli lahaa, horna loogu socon lahaa, inaan dareenno muxuu ahaa in wax walba gacanteena ay ku jiraan, aysan ku jirin qofka xafiiska fadhiyo. adaa doortay, adaa geeyey, adaa la xisaabtamayo, waxa u dhiibtay ayuu ku shaqeynaya. laakiin keligeed ma qaban karto. waxaa la shaqeeyo 6 qof oo kale, golaha waa 7 qof, xaafadayna ka soo wada baxaan. marka waxaa loo baahan yahay anaga iyo Brooke markaan heshiino, 4 kale xaafadayna ka soo baxayeen aan soo wadano wixii aan rabno inaan helayno, magaalada ka helayno, aan meel marsan karno. muhiimadaas waxay nagu xiran tahay inaan dhisno xiriir dadka jiiraanka kule annaga aan wada dhisano. shirka ka bacdi markuu noo dhimaadana inaan u kala baxno gruubyo ay ka soo baxaan gruubyo hogaamiya oo hor noo wada arrintaas inta ka shaqeeyo. marka muhiimadda koowaad dadka shirka uu noo leeyahay waa taa. midda labaadna waa isbarasho, gabadha inaan barano noo waranto, noo xog waranto. waxaan u soo diyaarinay waa 6 su'aalood oo ka hadlayo dhibaatooyinka guryaha ka jiro, arrimaha booliiska, iyo in lagu bixiyo maalgashi badqabta dhallinyaradeena iyo sida hor ugu socon lahayn horumarkooda laga shaqeeyo iyo badqabkooda. marka arrimahaasaytu arrimahan isugu nimi. muhiimadda ugu weyn ay ka hadli doonto mar walban waxaan isku dayay insha Allah inaan soo koobo warka si aan u jilciyo muhiimadda saan uga gaarnaan u baahannahay. ka bacdin insha Allah marka inaan dul qaadano, aan dhaqdhaqaaqin, aan ka faa'iideysano fursadda aan dadkana runtii si fiican isu barno saan hor ugu socon lahayn.
I will turn the mic to my co-leader, Jack, to ground us first.
Thank you for joining us today as the Rochester Coalitions of Isaiah coming together outdoors here in the park, socially distanced as much as we can and masks on. Thank you for being here. In the midst of this global pandemic and the economic downturn that we saw, where so many across race and class and religion were really struggling to care for themselves and for their families, it's tempting to merely push through this crisis, to say, I survived this crisis, we survived this crisis, let's go back to what is normal and familiar. But normal is what got us in this mess that we are in the first place. Normal is what exacerbated the pandemic and an economic downturn that exposed the deep inequities and inequalities that have been growing for decades. Therefore, in this meeting, we're not just asking our city council president to lead us and to have the vision that's going to lead us, into the bright light. But we also need to lead as constituents to fight for the kind of policies we deserve here in Rochester. Part of our leadership here today is showing up and actively engaging in this meeting, in getting to know your neighbor, and in imagining together the kind of community power that we can build and the better life we can establish for our future. But first, our meeting today is with Council President Brooke Carlson, building a relationship with her to co-lead with her for a brighter future for our families. So, Council President Brooke Carlson.
Thank you for having me. Well, that was a really powerful introduction. Thank you, Jack and Sala, for having me today. I'm so pleased to start this process. This is a long journey that all of you will be going through with your city council representatives for your wards, your county commissioners, and hopefully state representatives as well. So I'm just here to be an advocate and listen. Really, that is my goal for today. Listen to all of you. My responses are really less important than what you have to say and what I am able to hear you say and carry back to my various roles on city council and different commissions and boards that I'm on to represent all of you. So that is sort of the non-exciting introduction, but I'm really looking forward to answering all of your questions, and I have some notes jotted down, but I know that this is going to be such a special opportunity for me to listen to all of your stories and hear what your questions are, and I'll do my best to respond.
I would like to welcome Nima Bitri and Nasra to talk to us about lack of quality, affordable, cultural appropriate housing. So welcome, Nasra.
My name is Nasra Arta. I'm a 16-year-old junior at STEM. I've been living in Rochester for quite some time now. Coming from a big family, a house is essential. And to find a large house that could accommodate 10 people is very difficult here in Rochester. The first year I moved here, I told myself, how arduous can it be to find a 5-bedroom house? Lo and behold, it was very difficult. Most of the houses being built were either too small or too expensive. It has been 5 years since we started looking for a house, and we still haven't been able to find one. And it's not only my family that is facing this crisis in Rochester. Many people in this community have been forced to live in 2 separate apartments due to their big families, or worried of losing their Section 8 housing because of their new job that pays slightly higher than their old one. We need to put more investment into culturally appropriate and responsive affordable housing so this issue is addressed.
My name is Nim'a Badri, and I'm also a junior in high school. We have gathered here today to talk about some important issues concerning the welfare of the Rochester community. Nasra has made great points in the topic of culturally appropriate housing and the struggle many of our families face who are hardworking, especially larger families who cannot find accommodation in Rochester. My question to our City Council President is, how will you lead in partnership with us and the county to ensure that there is investment in culturally appropriate housing that accommodates all types of families that call Rochester home?
Very complex and tricky issue that requires all of us in the community to work together to address. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what the city's role is related to housing so you can understand sort of where our points of influence are compared to our partner, the county. And would love to hear more if you're willing to share sort of, well, I think we're talking all along the way about housing, or we will continue to talk about it, but always open to feedback or follow-up questions. Okay, so as I said, we have one of our strategic priorities around affordable living. So affordable housing is, of course, a top priority of our council. So the city has a couple different tools in our toolkit, one of which is we can use something called tax increment financing, or TIF, which is a long way of saying we use some incentives that offset taxes for developers to develop certain pieces of land that would otherwise not necessarily be developed that have some sort of public benefit. So something like housing, affordable housing, or childcare, or a grocery store could potentially qualify for the city to offset some of the future taxes of our paid to the city. So we are able to evaluate different projects proposed to us to determine whether they could receive those sort of dollars to offset the costs. which then of course allow them to offset the cost of their project to lower rents for affordable housing. So that is one and probably the primary way that the city can influence affordable housing. But there are a number of other ways that we can and are starting to explore. And really, this is not something the city has worked super deeply on besides this tax approach. So other ways that we are looking at it are how we zone our communities. So what type of zoning in a certain area either prohibits or incentivizes or allows for certain types or densities of housing that people can potentially add more units to a certain property so that they can have lower costs of each unit. So as more development happens around our community, even on the outskirts of the community, we're looking at whether they incorporate a mix of housing, so maybe townhomes or duplexes or fourplexes that would allow some price variability. Even if it's not considered affordable housing, it's more sort of middle income housing. So those are a couple formal ways that we can influence affordability of housing. And we are now formally creating something called a tri-government committee, where the school board, the county board, and the city council will be meeting regularly. We'll have a couple elected officials, including myself, and the board chairs of those two boards, plus our city administrator, county administrator, and superintendent, all coming together to talk about what are these most important issues for the collective community residents we serve, and how do we work together on solutions. So the collaboration is absolutely key in issues of housing.
haddaan wax yar ka yiraahdo jawaabteedii su-aashii la weydiiyey oo ahayd muxuu ahaa markaan ka hadlayno guryaha qayb waa dhowr laba qayb baan u kala qaadnay midda lahaanshaha way inoo dambeysaa ninka ku xiga weydiin doono laakiin waxaan ka hadlayno waxay ahayd war guryana deeqa dhisa dowladdu waxay ku bixisaa inay canshuurka ka dhinto say muxuu ahaa ooga hadashay qaybaha ka mid ah degmada waxay samayn kartaa inay canshuurta ka yareyso si ay u yareeyaan kirada kow labo guryahay dhisayaan marka ayaga in lagala hadlo marka maadaama canshuurta ay ka yareynayaan dee guryana deeqa in la dhiso 4 qol iyo 5 qol ka badan in la heli karo oo 2 qol 3 qol ay ku soo koobneen marka waxa laga hadlayaa tahay muhiimadda in la helo guryo deeqayo oo loo qalmo ayadana tiri sidoo kale waxaan sameynaynaa haddaan nahay guryaha deegaanka hadda waan wadnaa barnaamijyo noocan ah kow inaan horta la dagaalno qiimaha kor u kacayo kirada taasoo ay macnaheeda dadka guryaha dhisay inaan ka dhimayno canshuurta si arrintaa u sameeyaan labo inay la shaqeynayaan guddi ay sameeyeen ayaga iyo county-ga iyo iskuulka si ay uga hadlaan arrimaha dhibaatada nagu haya bulshada reer Rochester si ay uga wada shaqeyn lahaayeen saddex inuu jiro sidoo kale muxuu ahaa ninka ka soo baxo kiin oo ka shaqeeyo muxuu golaha deegaanka asagana qaybka ee xaafadda koowaad buu ka soo baxaa ward 1 asagana inuu ku jiro guddiga guriyeynta marka way socotaa qorshihii socda marka se wax loogu darsan doona anaga taas noo taala ka hadli doona laakiin muhiimadda ay noo sheegayso waxa weeye in muxuu ahaa qaybteeda midda kale sameyn karaan zoning waxaan zoning waxa la xaafadda maxaa lagu qaban karaa xaafaddan waa ganacsi kaliya xaafaddan waa guryaha waaweyn xaafaddan waa guryaha yar ayadan taasna way qaban karaan marka qaarkood marka inay bedelaan guri weyn in loo bedeli karo guryo yar laga dhigi karo si dadka ay u wada deeqaan loo helo marka runtii haddaan inta muxuu ahaa waa la wada fahmaan u maleynayaa
So as I said, the city is starting to think creatively about how we move beyond these existing tools that we have. And one of the things that we're really excited about is the fact that we have a number of properties that the city actually owns around our community. So instead of just selling the land or asking a developer to pay us to develop it, we are committed to bringing in community members, including those of you around this space who are interested, to help us think about what it would mean to design that space together that would help guide the developer in proposing a development that actually meets our community needs. So I know I was talking about just the sort of generic tools, but more in response to how do we develop culturally responsive housing. One of the most exciting opportunities are on those particular parcels where we would promote a co-design or a design process with our community to think about what that could look like to better meet our community needs. I'm so sorry I forgot to mention that.
waxaa jirta guryo ay leedahay degmada guryahaas degmada ay leedahay waxay tiri hadda intaan u yeeri lahayn qolyahan guryaha dhisa mise muxuu ahaa shirkadaha waaweyn waxaan samayn karnaa dadkiina meeshaan fadhiyo community intaan isu imaano aan ka wada hadalno saan intaan gadi lahayn balse u bedeli lahayn u isticmaali lahayn wax wada anfacaya bulshada mise dantiina ka shaqaynaya mise ha noqoto guryaha waaweyn aad ka hadlaysaan marka fikirka aan isweydaarsano taana runtii waan kiilaa inaan ku daray tiri taas bay noogu dartay. For now, I'd also like to welcome the next speaker, Mohammed Kodah, who will be talking about housing disparities. So again, we'll be talking more of housing. So please welcome Mohammed Kodah with me.
My name is Mohammed Kodah, and as we were talking about housing, so I would like to add a few more things. As you're aware of it, Minnesota has some of the highest homeownership rate in the nation. However, when it comes to the homeownership rate of people of color, Minnesota is ranked the bottom. And as they call it, the homeownership rate gap, Minnesota's homeownership gap rate, it's not great, basically, let's say that. So the disparity between white homeownership rate and homeownership rate of people of color is widening. This trend has a big implication for this generation and generations to come. If it continues to trend downhill, it will perpetuate the inequality and lack of integrational wealth. We know that wealth gap widens with age. In addition to the significant disparity in homeownership rate in Rochester, people of color who would like to rent face additional challenges such as high costs and limited places to rent. In addition to that, some of us face a discrimination when it comes to looking for a house that accommodates a big family. So we can all agree that everyone in Rochester and in Minnesota deserves the security, safety of a home, no matter what race, religion, gender, and past history, and to live in a dignified life. Over the past several months, it has come to clear to the public that there's a significant push and pull between the city and the county, whose responsibility it is to address the needs of the people who are unhoused in Rochester. With the deepening of the housing crisis, which worsened by COVID, and we all know that it disproportionately affects people of color, that we would like to ask the council president, what would you do to address the disparity, and how would you work with the rest of the city councilors and the mayor to basically address both the homeownership gap rate and cost of rent that's keep going up and is becoming unaffordable for many families like us? Thank you.
Such an important question, so complex. Again, the city has some tools we can use. The Housing Coalition, again, of which the city is part, has identified the opportunity for home ownership, especially among our BIPOC or Black and Indigenous people of color in our community, as one of the top areas of focus. So this unprecedented investment from our county into housing, including the Housing Coalition, is a hopeful advance, I would say, related to a focus on home ownership across the community. It is absolutely no secret, and it's mortifying what the rates of home ownership for our Black residents compared to our white residents here in Rochester is. I mean, it's just atrocious. So yes, there are things we can do as a community. There are things we can do as a city, and it relates to housing, but it also relates to workforce development and supporting opportunities for our communities of color within Rochester to be in spaces that they can advance their own business goals, and the city can support Black and Indigenous people of color as entrepreneurs. And how do we really use our leverage as a city and our dollars that we invest in contracting with businesses around the community to focus on Black and Indigenous people of color led businesses. So one of the ways we're doing this is, or a couple of the ways we're doing it, is through our Destination Medical Center contracting, as well as our city contracting for different construction projects. We know we have a $6 billion investment in downtown Rochester through DMC. Those dollars absolutely should be considered as targeting Black-led or people of color-led organizations as well as staffed organizations. So
waxay ka hadashay dhismooyinka socday arrimaha socda dhismaha runtii muxuu ahaa in isku dayaya hataa muxuu ahaa barnaamij waxaa jira ayadii meerka ka shaqeynayaan Bloomberg Initiative la dhaho dumarka say u soo galaan arrimaha dhismaha sida wadooyinka iyo construction waxyaalo badan u soo gala wadooyin kali ma aha laakiin meelo badan dhismooyinka badan oo socda ka socda magaalada in laga qayb qaato sidoo kale lacag waxaa jirta ilaa 6 bilyan oo loogu talagalay horumarinta magaalada Rochester siba gaar ahaan in aad loo geliyo muxuu ahaa dadka muxuu ahaa madow mise muxuu dadka laga tirada badan yahay magaalada joogo so minority loo yaqaan marka dadkaas oo dhan marka laga qayb qaato marka su'aalihii waa tii hore tu lagu daray wuxuu sii socdaan arrimihii guriyaan ka hadlaynaa welina way sii socotaan ku gada jirnaa. With that said, I will also welcome our next speaker, Mohammed Haji, who will be talking about COVID response. So please help me welcome.
My name is Mohammed Haji. I'll be talking about COVID response and public safety. The Delta variant continues to ravage our communities. It's clear that we need the local government to provide collective solutions to stop the spread. It was disappointing to see the mayor's mask requirement voted down by the council. Although we appreciated your vote in favor, that said, there are others things that the city can do. As mayor has done a vaccine mandate for the city employees, especially the police and others who engage directly with the members of the public, is one necessary first step. An ordinance for our local businesses to provide sick and safe time so that all workers across income levels are able to stay home without losing wages when they're ill is another important approach to ensure racial and economic equity in our city. Would you support or propose these measures? What other approaches will you bring to ensure the city is doing well to end the pandemic and make sure people like my grandpa who has had a kidney transplant is safe and protected? Thank you for all coming.
Okay, so the city obviously voted down the mayor's mask mandate. My position was that I would support a more narrow focus on the mandate to protect our youth who are not yet vaccinated as well as our vulnerable adults, and thinking through, what are our most critical, essential places that we need as humans to access, like grocery stores and childcare and homeless shelters and some human services, pharmacies, that sort of thing. So that was my perspective on why I voted in favor. I hope to amend the mandate to make it a little bit more focused and able to be implemented. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what the city's doing right now behind the scenes without council having taken formal action. So we are absolutely moving forward as a city in the space of COVID. For our own employees, we are awaiting our state OSHA office, which is our workforce protection office, which is administered through the state. So our federal guidelines from the Biden administration will be channeled through that state office to guide what our city will have to do to meet that mandate. So that's all in the works right now, and our administration is waiting to see what happens with that. In the meantime, we are voting tomorrow on whether we're going to offer an incentive to our staff. There are about 250 out of 900 plus staff who are either not yet vaccinated or have not submitted a vaccine proof of vaccination card. So we are offering an incentive. We are, in general, the administration is trying to remove any barrier to getting staff vaccinated. So one of the issues that ties directly to public safety and you may have heard is that we hear that our law enforcement officers in particular are vaccinated at a rate of about 70%, but not 70% have submitted their cards. So we don't, there are cultural issues at play here within our law enforcement agency that we just don't know whether they're vaccinated or not. So this is the chance to sort of turn the corner on that, and talking about advocacy, that is a space that you might consider getting involved in. and supporting our city staff to get vaccinated across all different departments. And some departments are incredibly high rates of vaccination and some are.
su-aashu waxay say maxaa cudurkan faafo socdo looga hortegi karaa looga qayb qaadan karaa way ku mahadsantahay iyada inay muxuu ahaa taladii ay soo jeedisay meeradda in afka la xirto inay ayada ku raacday laakiin golaha intiisa kale dee hal cudub bay ku leedahay ay muxuu ahaa soo diideen marka laakiin waxay tiri farsamooyin baan isku dayaan dib u bedelno laakiin aan farsamooyin kale la imaano si inaan kordhino dadka talaalka qaadanayo siiba shaqaalaha in muxuu ahaa la wada talaalataan waxay u taalaa shaqada in lasoo dhexmarsiiyo maamulka siduu madaxweynaha ugu dhawaaqay dadka dowladda u shaqeynaya marka iyadoo la isticmaalaya xeerka si toosa loo soo dhexmaro maamulka arrin maamul ay noqoto midda kale anagaan samayn karnay waxay tiri shaqaalaha u shaqeeyo sida hadda qaarkood loo siinaya lacag dowladda u bixinaysay in ayagana wax noocaas oo kale ugu bedelaan si dadka isu talaalaan marka runtii talaalka magaalada aad buu u fiican degmada dadka 70% baa lagu qiyaasaa shaqaalaha dowladda sidaas la mid ah sida dhanka booliiska laakiin weli waraaqahooda qaarna ma ay soo xareen inay cadeynayaan inta kale ilaa 250 oo dhiman istalaalaysan in lagu dhiirigeliyo habkay isu talaali lahayn horna ugu socon lahaayeen laakiin muhiimaddu waxay tiri afka kaliya la xirtama ee waxyaalo badan talaalka inaan kordhino qof walban istalaalo kulligeena aan ka wada qaadanaya muhiim ah Umar.
My name is Umar Noor. I'm Director of Somali American Social Service. They call SASA. I would like to, I was able to receive last year, 2020, diversity champion to the mayor of the city of Rochester. I was always talking about how we can get diversity inclusion as an immigrant population. One time I was able to talk to the city attorney and I was speaking with him. I say we feel something about to our justice, and he hired Somali prosecutor right now is working here. So as the police, I invited the police chief before this guy, not Franklin.
Yeah.
And that time we have discussion. So we would like to ask you, the police, and also that's the hiring the police officer is help relationship between the immigrant population. Also, as you remember, we are 20% of the immigrant population of the city of Rochester. When I'm talking about diversity inclusion, it's a many area. Just I would like to say thank you, the Mayo Clinic. So we would like to ask you, hiring, for the minority, we have the skill right now as a minority. When they come hiring in the Rochester Public School, we have money, graduate educational teachers were able to work over there. Also, RCTC, I made money 3% last time to ask them to hire some, consular. As you know, money in the first year, UMR, they have also what they call curriculum in Somali language. So immigrant students is high and public school, and also the college, we feel a big gap. So as City Council Chair, we ask you to fill that gap, whatever you can. Thank you.
Few things. First of all, the City Council does not oversee the police department. We oversee the police department's budget. So we do have some level of authority, but it is the mayor that is the police chief's boss and technically oversees the policing. So one unique thing about being council president is when the mayor is out of town, I am the acting mayor. So I have actually had quite a bit of opportunity, including the last 11 days, of being acting mayor and working with the police chief. So I do have sort of a unique perspective, both from the council side and in the experience of working so closely with the police chief. And then again, on the Olmsted County Justice Commission, we're very committed to working with law enforcement and the rest of the judicial system and legal system around issues of justice and equity. So I have sort of multiple ways of touching these incredibly important issues. So how do we work with our community to prevent engagement with law enforcement that can impact somebody's life forever? So I feel confident in the police chief. I believe we need to continue to push on him, and that we are up against, nationally of course, a culture in our law enforcement that needs to change. And I think we are facing a really interesting time because not only has there been such demonstrated racial and social injustice related to law enforcement, but we have an incredible workforce shortage for law enforcement. So we are going to be forced to rethink public safety in all our communities, including here. And I know that both the Sheriff's Department and our police department locally have unprecedented shortages for the future of hiring.
waxay runtii su-aashii la weydiiyey konaysaa in la helo booliiska magaalada waa inay u ekaadaan magaalada isbeddelka ka socdo in laga dhex helo bulshada ku wada nool si muxuu ay u helaan ayaga naftooda wada shaqayn rasmi ah qof markaa helayso luuqadaada ku hadlo kuwa eg dhaqankaada yaqaano waa ka duwan tahay qofka kale siduu kuu fiirinayo mise wuxuu ka arkay muxuu ahaa idaacadaha mise inuu kuwa dhaqmo si cunsurinimo ka duwan sidii muxuu ahaa la rabay akhlaaqiyad marka su-aashu weydii taasi jawaabteedana waxay ahayd runtii ay siisay tir horta ayada toos golaha deegaanka toos uma hor imaadaan booliiska laakiin waxay ku leeyihiin lacagta ayaga muxuu ahaa u maamulo dhaqaalaha ayaga muxuu ahaa sanad walba ugu daro mise ka jaro dhaqaalahay soo bandhigtaan oo keenaan laakiin waxay tiri ayada marmar qaarkood markuu meeqan yahay muxuu ahaa duqa degmada ayadaa waxay tahay muxuu ahaa kusimaha noqoto oo dhankaasna way leedahay xiriir gooni ay la shaqayso ee muxuu ahaa ninka haysto muxuu ahaa booliiska marka taas shaqaynteeda mar waxay u saamaxaysaa inay ogaato si hoosan u ogaato waxa socdo waxay tiri commissionerka booliiska oo ku kalsoonaya shaqada uu wado inuu isbeddel keeno inuu la shaqeeyo muxuu ahaa dadka bulshada ku nool Rochester muxuu ahaa madow iyo muxuu ahaa dadka laga tira badan cid walba inuu la shaqeeyo sidoo kale wuxuu sameeyay guddi gole oo muxuu ahaa la hayr gareeyo oo madow ah kala shaqeeyo si uu qaadan lahaa shaqaaluhu qaadanayo. We're running a little bit out of time, so I'll have one last question to squeeze in, and Sarah, please welcome.
My name is Sada. I'm a current student at the University of Minnesota. I'm also a resident here in Rochester, Minnesota. I'm also a member of many organizations and have been involved in many different programs in the southern region of Minnesota. Over the years, we've seen an increase in population and diversity communities, yet the lack of resources for diverse communities is very much limited. Investing in our diverse communities and activities for youth development is essential for our community. For example, discussions about city investments in maintaining or converting the only 2 outdoor public pools, while many Muslim women just seek a public pool that is only for women. How will you ensure that moving forward, the city's investments in our youth and community activities will consider racial equity so that we are inclusive and creating opportunities for all community members?
Oh, such good questions. First of all, our investment as a city in our Rochester Olmsted Youth Commission is incredibly important in guiding the city and county. So I'm very grateful for the Youth Commission work. The mayor also has a Mayor's Youth Council that helps her with different decisions in priority areas. So we do have some formal structures in place for youth in our community to make sure that they are part of our guidance as a policy-making body. These big issues of how we invest in culturally appropriate or responsive youth programming and activities and parks infrastructure and everything, it really needs to come from us being more intentional around how we design our priorities to begin with. So not only those formal structures, but like I talked about before, we're moving towards the gold standard in our city of engaging community and community reflective of our community, or representatives reflective of our community and how we design our big infrastructure projects. So I'm very hopeful as we move forward that there'll be more of an engaged process. Right now we have both our Soldiers Field and Silver Lake master planning processes going on, where we are working with our community to guide how we will redesign those spaces to be more responsive to not only the neighborhoods but the overall community. So we have a few things going on that we're trying to move in that direction instead of how I look at it as a consultant and as a city council member. Instead of the city applying solutions to the community, it's the community driving solutions that meet our community's needs in a way that reflects the best use of our limited resources and tax dollars and federal dollars and everything. So, long story short.
We have addressed a lot of issues today, and really we have built powerful initiatives and had great discussions and guidance. We thank you for the guidance and the directions that you're guiding us towards. But like she has said, and we have started with this in afternoon's meeting, that Brooke herself cannot do it. So we have to do the work as well, basically. She has only one voice in her committee, the council members. She has one voice and one vote. And when we ask her to co-govern with us, I believe she's ready and committed, as she has stated. But we want also our ward council members to also do the same as well. But we are the ones who can hold them to that and who can also be able to do that as well. So runtii maanta waxaan isugu imaan waxay tahay mas-uuliyadda inaan wada qaadano maaha keligeed wayna hagtay way noo sheegtay wadadii loo mar lahaa iyo wixii loo mar lahaa waxyaalaan ka cabanay wax badan oo runtii jiro u baahan wax laga qabto laakiin hawsha weli gacanteena ku jirtaa farana kama qodno waxaa loo baahan yahay keligeed hal cod bay ku leedahay 7 qof ee golaheeda 7 qof marka inaan ka helno 3 kale mise 4 kale lagu soo daro xaggee joogaan meel fog ma jiraan xaafadeena degan yihiin inaan dib u doono oo dib u raadino. Thank you very much.
Somali Rochester Media subscribe.